What happens when a single dad chef, barely making ends meet, hears the desperate cries of a baby in his small café, only to discover she belongs to a billionaire mother who has forgotten what love tastes like? Stay with me till the end, because this recipe won't just change a life, it will break hearts and heal them all at once. And before we dive in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner for more stories that touch the soul. The sound of soft sobs drifted through the quiet café, cutting through the faint clatter of dishes and the low hum of the morning crowd. It was early, too early for drama in the little corner eatery that David, a single father, had poured his soul into. The place wasn't grand, just 5 wooden tables, a chalkboard menu, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread that carried down the street. David wore his apron like a second skin, his hands calloused from years of cooking, and his eyes carried both exhaustion and warmth. Every dish he made was more than food, it was love on a plate, because he knew what it felt like to give everything you had for someone you loved. And yet, as he leaned against the counter wiping a mug, he froze when the tiny cry grew louder, almost trembling with need. Turning his head, he spotted a woman in a tailored suit, her phone pressed tightly to her ear, pacing near the window. The baby carriage beside her rocked slightly, its occupant red-faced and wailing. The mother's voice was sharp, urgent, full of numbers and deals, not lullabies. It was a sight that tugged at something deep in David's chest. He knew that cry. He remembered when his own daughter, Emily, would scream with hunger and confusion, and he would scramble to calm her, fumbling with bottles, praying he wouldn't fail her. Those nights were long, especially after his wife had walked out, leaving him with nothing but a toddler, an old recipe notebook from his grandmother, and the will to survive. He wiped his hands on his apron, heart thudding, and approached slowly. "Excuse me, miss," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentleness of someone who had rocked a baby in the dark. The woman glanced at him briefly, irritation flickering in her sharp green eyes before she turned away, continuing her conversation. The baby only grew louder, the sound shredding through the café like a broken note in a beautiful song. David crouched down beside the carriage, his big frame somehow tender as he leaned closer. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, his voice lowering into a soothing hum. The baby's tiny fists flailed, her cries jagged and raw. Without thinking, David reached behind the counter, pulling out a small saucepan. He moved with urgency but also with an odd calm, as if instinct guided every step. Within minutes, the café filled with the soft scent of warm milk infused with honey and a touch of cinnamon. It was an old recipe his grandmother had sworn by, one that had once eased his daughter's tears. He poured the mixture carefully, cooled it to the perfect temperature, and returned to the carriage. The billionaire woman hadn't even noticed, her voice still sharp as she argued about contracts and deadlines, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. David picked up the bottle, glanced at the baby's watery eyes, and gently held it to her lips. At first she fussed, turning away, but then, miraculously, the crying slowed. Her tiny mouth latched onto the bottle, and within seconds, silence replaced chaos. A hush fell over the café as customers turned their heads, watching the transformation. The baby's breathing steadied, her eyes fluttered, and soon she was drinking contentedly, nestled in peace. David smiled softly, a lump forming in his throat. It was as though, in that moment, time had folded back on itself, and he was once again holding Emily in his arms, feeding her through her tears. The mother finally noticed the silence and whipped her head around, her eyes widening at the sight of a stranger cradling her child with more patience than she had shown in weeks. She ended the call abruptly, her lips tightening. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice carrying the weight of someone used to control. But beneath her sharpness was something else, something fragile. David looked up, his expression calm, unshaken. "Feeding her." "She was hungry," he replied simply. His tone wasn't defensive, nor was it arrogant. It was just fact. The woman's eyes flickered with something, guilt, perhaps, or shame, but she quickly masked it, reaching out to take the baby back. "You can't just," she began, but her words faltered as she saw her daughter's face. The baby was no longer screaming, no longer red with distress. She was content, nestled against David's steady arm, the bottle secure. It was a picture of peace she hadn't seen in far too long. The cafe customers whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between the mother and the man with the apron. Some smiled knowingly, others frowned at the woman's coldness. For David, though, none of it mattered. He was focused only on the little one, making sure the bottle didn't spill, making sure her comfort was complete. After a moment, he carefully handed the baby back, his rough hand surprisingly steady. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "And she deserves more than hunger." His words were gentle, but they carried an invisible weight, the kind that settled into hearts and refused to leave. The woman opened her mouth but couldn't find words. She held her daughter close, staring down at her peaceful face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her chest tightened in a way business deals never could. She swallowed hard, blinking quickly. She didn't want anyone to see her falter, especially not a stranger in a stained apron. But there it was, her walls cracking, ever so slightly. David returned to the counter, busying himself with the dishes, pretending not to notice. Yet inside, memories stormed his heart. He thought of Emily, how feeding her had been the only thing that kept him going some nights, how recipes and love had intertwined into survival. His cafe wasn't just a business, it was a shrine to those moments, a place where food was more than flavor. It was comfort. It was healing. And maybe, just maybe, it was what this woman needed too, though she didn't know it yet. Outside, the city roared with traffic and ambition, but within those four cafe walls, something quiet and profound had just unfolded. A single dad chef had fed a crying baby, and in doing so, planted the first seed of change in a billionaire mother's heart, one she wasn't ready to admit had begun to grow. The following morning, the cafe door opened with the soft chime of its bell. David was sweeping the floor, humming a tune he used to sing to Emily when she was small. He glanced up and froze. It was her, the elegant woman from yesterday, only today she didn't look untouchable. Her tailored suit was gone, replaced by a simple blouse, her hair tied back, and in her arms was the same little girl, wide-eyed and calm. She hesitated at the door, clutching the baby close, as though unsure if she belonged in a place like this. David set the broom aside, forcing a smile. "Back again?" he asked gently. She nodded, almost embarrassed. I didn't even say thank you yesterday." Her voice cracked, the sharpness gone. "I was so focused on work that I didn't see. I didn't see her suffering." Her eyes welled up as she looked down at her daughter, then back at David. "But you did. You fed her, and it was more than just food." She stopped crying because she felt cared for. "I can't remember the last time I held her like that." David's chest tightened. He motioned for her to sit. "Babies don't just need milk," he said softly. "They need warmth. They need someone to stop and listen." The woman swallowed hard, tears slipping free. For the first time in years, she wasn't the billionaire whose name opened doors. She was just a mother, broken by her own neglect. Watching David serve her a bowl of stew, simple vegetables, slow-cooked with herbs and love, she tasted it, and the first spoonful stopped her cold. She covered her mouth as her tears fell freely. It tastes like my mother used to cook before everything became about business." Her voice shook, carrying decades of longing. David sat quietly, letting her break, because he knew healing often began in silence. His cafe wasn't just a place to eat, it was a place where love seeped into every bite. And in that moment, his recipe had done what no boardroom, no wealth, no deal could ever accomplish. It had reached her heart. The baby cooed softly, resting against her mother's chest. The woman kissed her daughter's forehead, her tears dampening her tiny curls. "I've been so blind," she whispered. "I thought giving her everything meant money, security, nannies. But yesterday, a stranger in an apron reminded me that real love is in the small things, like feeding her when she cries. David gave a small smile, eyes glistening. Sometimes the richest meals are the simplest ones, he said. She looked up at him, gratitude shining through her tears. For once, she wasn't the billionaire. She was just a mother who had been given a second chance. And as the cafe filled with quiet warmth, the story of a single dad chef, a crying baby, and a mother rediscovering her heart became something more than chance. It became a reminder that love, when shared, can feed the soul. So, if this story touched you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner, where we share more stories that heal hearts and remind us what truly matters.